Hello everyone, this is CJNovo992 and today we're back for another brand new video. And today is the day, ladies and gentlemen, that we all knew was coming. We've had mapped down on our calendars for a little while. It's time to discuss the pinnacle of Scottish football. One of the only true sellable assets we've got as a country. The thing that brings in whatever money we get is usually down to this fixture. But considering how truly erratic both teams have been so far this season, how both fan bases are pretty much in the exact same spot, voicing their concerns, their frustrations for people in and around the club / the board, and the fact that we're here to talk about an Old Firm matchup where the longest serving Old Firm manager is 1 frickin' week, I think it's fair to say, with this being a semi-final on top with all that there's a hell of a lot me and they need to discuss. So come float down here with me, Georgie, as we go ahead and talk about another game of football then, shall we? And if at any point you feel that this channel was worth hitting that like button for, please consider doing so. Or if you haven't done so already, like over 51% of our current regular viewers, if you don't mind hitting that subscribe button, if you feel the channel was worth it to try and help us towards 70k, that would also be greatly appreciated. But I know that's on me to go ahead and earn that like and earn that subscription. So let's go and try and do that then together then, shall we? And before we go ahead and dive into the Rangers perspective, as always, we've got to talk about the dance pattern. We've got to talk about the other side of the coin, or the other side of the city, if you will, who are none other than Celtic Football Club, who at my current time of recording are sitting second in the All League and are managed by none other than Martin O'Neill. That's right, I said Martin O'Neill, ladies and gentlemen. I know the clocks went back last week, but no one tell me it was going back to 2005. But all joking and all that to one side, I think it's fair to say, considering the fact there is a new manager, all is not well on the other side of the city, and where there's a hell of a lot more people more qualified to break this down and give you the true ins and out. Again, I'll only be able to give you an outsider's perspective. I think it is worth noting that managerial change and that change in the way that Brendan Rodgers did leave the football club, as it was announced late on Tuesday night that he had resigned, and where the jokes almost wrote themselves about him getting beat off Hearts and facing a challenge in Bolton again, where the jokes again were about to right themselves. The jokes were almost overshadowed almost instantly by one of the maddest things I've ever seen. A Celtic stakeholder or shareholder, whatever you want to go ahead and call him, Dermot Desmond, went ahead and released an absolute incredible hit piece on Brendan Rodgers, pretty much teabagging the guy whilst calling him a liar and saying he's been manipulating stuff in the press. It was honestly incredible. Again, I've seen some statements in my time, you know what I mean? I support a team that gets called Statement FC, but I've never seen anything like that. I was like Varuk in the late 90s, ladies and gentlemen. As I read all that, I just glanced at it and I went, damn. Now again, I know people might be jumping on this saying, wait a minute, CJ, why are we going down this rabbit hole? Why are we talking about this in terms of the preview video? What about the stats? What about the statistics? But again, they are important, and we'll touch on them later on in the video. In my personal opinion, this managerial change, this stuff that's happening behind the scenes, is drastically changing this upcoming fixture and puts a completely different outlook on this game from what it looked like just a couple days ago. Because I'll be honest with you, and I've said this many, many times, and it sometimes went very wrong, but again, I didn't fear a Brendan Rodgers Celtic team. I just never know this brand of football, especially recently. I mean, Brendan Rodgers' Celtic team was the only team in the league not to score versus Russell Martin's Rangers. That should be enough for a statement. I should go, right, that's my explanation done, and I should be able to absolutely bounce. But again, at the same time as where I know he was successful and he won trophies, etc., etc., in terms of the brand of football, the standard of football, there was never son or never ounce of me that sat and went, oh no, this could get badly out of hand, the same way it did under Ange Postecoglou, which I've been open about and talking about. That's the best Celtic team I've seen, ironically, since Martin O'Neill 20 years ago. And that for me is not only the biggest talking point regarding this game of football, but it's also by far the most interesting talking point. It's just how different that mentality and how different that approach is going to be. Because prior to Martin O'Neill coming in to the dugout at Celtic, or returning to the dugout at Celtic, I should say, we all knew what Brendan Rodgers was going to do. I knew, you knew, Rangers knew, and it was just that way, you know what I mean? But also on the flip side, Celtic knew what we were going to do and how we were going to line up, right? We were going to put a midfielder on Callum McGregor to cut the head off the snake, and then it would just be sort of a stalemate where you'd have to rely on either an individual piece of magic during the possession for possession's sake, or maybe a set piece or something like that. That's the way these last couple of old firms have been. That's the way it's been for far too long. But now you've got this complete unpredictability about not only them, but we're in the exact same way. Ladies and gentlemen, Rangers Football Club are a complete unknown regarding this fixture as well, because the one thing that Danny Rue has shown us in his short managerial tenure in the old dugout is that he is willing to tweak and change not only prior to the game on a game-to-game basis, but during a game. And again, that makes this an unknown, and it makes maybe a fixture that happens 20 times a season a hell of a lot more unique. And speaking of unique, by the way, of course we mentioned the fact that Celtic were sitting first in the table, which is the first time we've done that in a long time in a preview video. I've needed that now. Unfortunately, and as cruel and ironic as it is, the time that I get to sit here and say Celtic aren't top, we're not the ones that that's Sayre in the old ticker. But again, it is a perfect wee summary of how both teams are actually gone, right? Because mostly the majority of the spotlight has been on how bad Rangers have been. And honestly, I get it. Rangers have been really poor. The record speaks for itself. But where the seemingly entirety of Scottish football has been focused on how bad Rangers are and mocking and laughing. See, when you cut through the entire nonsense that is Scottish football and you just look at the cold, hard facts, we know how bad we've been. But yet, do you know Rangers are closer to Celtic in the league table than Celtic are to the top? Now, I can imagine there'll be a couple people going, wait a minute, that can't be true. Rangers have been historically bad. It's been here, there, and everywhere. But it is true, ladies and gentlemen. And if you need your mind blown even fuller, in the league season, in league football, Celtic football clubs somehow, some way, lost more games than us. Ladies and gentlemen, and again, we were under the management of Russell, Kenneth, Alexander, Martin, talking about anxiety, selling our best players and Dittmer boys and locks. Troops, that's how crazy this season's been. That's how unpredictable this season's been. But that's the two giants of Scottish football almost having a dance-off to see who can be more erratic in a game-by-game basis. And I think that's where we're going to go next, to talk about this journey and figure out how Celtic have got here. Because, again, everything Rangers have done has been well documented. How's Celtic in this spot where they are right now? Well, again, the most recent game of football was a scanting at Tynecastle with the top of the table clash versus Hearts that eventually did see Brendan Rodgers a couple of days later resigning, and everyone shocked, everyone surprised on that issue. But see, at the same time, see if you've just been paying attention and you've not had your full focus on Rangers Football Club and been paying attention to the house that was on fire behind you, it's just been sort of telegraphed that this is the way that was gone for Celtic, because the week prior to getting beat off Hearts, they got beat off Dundee. We've already talked about the goalless draw, for instance, versus Rangers, where again they couldn't score versus a Russell Martin-led Rangers team, but they also had a goalless draw versus Hibs. I mean, the start of the season relied a late winner versus St Mirren. They had to rely on a 92nd minute winner at Parkhead to beat Motherwell. They had to rely on a 96th minute penalty versus Kilmarnock. This is, again, been out there. There's been clear warning signs. It's been ignored as the performances and the results have been stuttering and have getting worse. So again, to answer a question that I've been asked many times over the last couple of days is, am I shocked, am I surprised that Brendan Rodgers is no longer in the job or no longer the manager of Celtic? Honestly, ladies and gentlemen, no. Because again, they've been doing this. It's just unfortunate we've been like that. But as you may be able to see and be able to tell from today's video, there's a hell of a lot of parallels and similarities where both football clubs find themselves in terms of the erratic performances, the up and down nature, the frustration with the off the park people in the building, and obviously the managerial search, etc, etc. There's also the little upgrade in turn, because we know how we've felt under Danny over the last little while, and to be fair, Celtic Football Club bounced back after 2 defeats in a row with an emphatic 4-0 scanting at Parkhead versus Falkirk. And again, some people were, oh, Falkirk might take some, Falkirk might take some. And again, I rubbished that away each and every single time that was mentioned to me. And again, that's not me being disrespectful to Falkirk. Big fan of a lot of the players, really big fan of their manager, and again they obviously took points off us earlier on in the season, but that was peak Russell Martin get out my football club mode right there, so it was a different scenario and a different circumstance. But again, going to Parkhead, you're always going to be up against it, especially with how poor Celtic were under Brendan Rodgers this season. Rodgers' side still put 4 past Falkirk earlier on in this very competition we play Celtic in. So I didn't learn too much from that game, barring the fact that Martin O'Neill was willing to make some big calls regarding some personnel with some big players dropped, the likes of Kieran Tierney, etc., which was a bit of an eye-opener. But for me, and it's just the way I'm looking at it, and again, I could be completely wrong, I think some of the decisions made in that game of football wasn't necessarily laying the law down. I think that was one eye on this upcoming game and knowing that Celtic Football Club at Parkhead should have more than enough in the tank to go ahead and beat recently promoted Falkirk. And to be fair, they did that. You know what I mean? Absolutely battered Falkirk with some great performances and great goals. But again, that doesn't surprise me, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about Celtic Football Club beating Falkirk at Parkhead. It should be happening because despite everything we've talked about so far, there's still really good players in that dressing room, and to sit here pretend that they're filled with bad players and they can't do none, there's no threats, there's no danger men, would be absolutely daft. They are still a dangerous side. They will still fancy their chances at winning every bit of silverware so far this season. I'm not sure what the bookies' favourites are right now. Obviously, going in, I've not really been paying too much attention this year, but I imagine they'll still be by far favourites to win everything in sight. So the underdog narrative doesn't really wash with me. They've got really good players. They've gone through a bad time, and I can hope, ladies and gentlemen, as a Rangers fan, we make that bad time worse with a big performance on Sunday. But again, you've got Celtic with a managerial bounce, you've got Rangers with a managerial bounce, and something needs to give. But again, the unpredictability of this game and the style and the formations just makes everything go up in the air, because anything can happen. And that's me, ladies and gentlemen. That's all I've really got to say. They'll be right up fancying their chances, and I believe they will be favourites in the game of football. Again, the overall season should certainly suggest that, especially with some of the price tags on some other individual players. But again, they aren't exactly the attacking threat they once were, and we've got to take advantage of that. In the first 5 minutes of this game, Rangers must put a marker down, because again, they've had that buzz, they've got that bounce, they've just won big. So the first 5 minutes, you've got to absolutely smother them out and show that this will be a tougher test than the last game versus Falkirk. And again, the first 5 minutes will tell us everything, but that's all I can really say regarding this Celtic team. Now it's time to move away from them and get to the Rangers then. And it's quite mad to think about, right? Because obviously we've done this channel, me and thee, now for a very long time. Especially when you're looking at old firms, there's been so many videos, post preview, and then obviously the recaps. Some of them very painful. Some of them was nice to go ahead and film, but we've pretty much talked this fixture to death, if you want to go ahead and say that, and there'd be very little left to discuss. But again, this is actually a first on that. In fact, I think if you look beyond the channel, I'm pretty damn sure this is the first ever Old Firm matchup in which both managers have left the dugout in the same season. So again, there is that question mark around that. But again, where we talked about Martin's impact and how he managed to get a win out them right away, I need to stop saying Martin because I keep thinking Russell Martin rather than Martin O'Neill. I would say Martin O'Neill's a better manager than Russell Martin. Dare I go ahead and say that? But that's who I think of when I say that. But again, the Rangers fans, we know what an upturn of fortunes could do. We know what a good manager in the dugout can change, because we are the perfect representation of that. In just 10 frickin' days, we all went from one of the darkest, depression-filled seasons I've ever seen at this club. You could see no light. It was just darkness. There was so much question. We weren't just losing games or drawing points. We were getting mauled in games. We were playing teams in Scottish football that on paper we should be beating, yet they were out shooting us and they were having more shots on target. You know what I mean? The midfield was just a paperweight. It was just getting pushed all over the place. The attack was toothless, and defensively we were getting ripped to absolute shreds every single game. Then Danny Rue has came into this football club, and like that, that saw change, and that's an example of what impact their managerial bounce could be, and that's again what's going head to head. The Mora. Because I look at the Rangers side right now and I think of everything we just listed, how poor we were, and then 10 days onwards, Danny Rose went into the building, realised what our weaknesses are, where we're hurting ourselves, where we're beating ourselves, and he's focused on tidying that up just to give us a platform to then go and start winning games, even if it is ugly wins, even if it is bad wins like that in terms of Hibs. By the way, there's no such thing as a poor win. By the way, I'll take that every day of the week. But I understand people are saying it wasn't a great performance and that 3 points is 3 points and we weren't picking them up. That's the first time this season that we've won back-to-back games, and that's a credit to the actual manager. But again, defensively, the work and the turnaround he's done in such a short period of time is really impressive. We were a team that was on a record-breaking, embarrassing run of conceding 25 matches in a row in terms of away games. Alright, it was shocking. It was well over a year. There was Clement in that. There was Barry in that. There was Martin. 3 managers were a part of that, and Danny's came in and flipped that. And not only did he flip it in a game that was maybe against a lesser team in a cup competition or somebody that was missing all the best players. No, we broke our defensive streak, ladies and gentlemen, and we broke that bad streak versus a side that had scored in 22 consecutive home matches. So you had a team that hadn't kept a clean sheet for 25 games versus a team that couldn't stop scoring through 22 home games. Son had to give, and it was Rangers that stood tall at the end of the day. And again, that to me is really, really impressive and shows the improvements that have been done already. But, and there is unfortunately a but, just because there has been some improvements doesn't mean that we're magically fixed, and that's us. We are an emphatic, rampant Rangers team that's ready to win everything in sight. I hope we are, ladies and gentlemen. But again, there's still a hell of a lot of work today where he's tidied up the defence and stopped the clear bleeding of this team. He needs to figure out the midfield, get that right, balance, but also more importantly, get this strike force scoring more goals than it actually is and get some life into the attacking game. And that's where I imagine the focus will be next, especially when Old Firm coming up. You know what I mean? We can't play the same way we played at Easter Road if we want to go ahead and reach the final of that competition. We need to take that step forward, and again, where that's a big ass of Danny to again focus on a complete other area and tidy that up while still trying to stopgap a bleeding area on the back. That's what happens when you're in the big job, ladies and gentlemen, and you're talking about an Old Firm game. You're talking about an Old Firm semi-finals. Most, if not all, Old Firms are really determined and defined by the middle of the pack, and whoever wins that battle usually comes out on top. And again, our midfield's not exactly been our greatest asset so far this season. It's been very hit and miss, and just after what was one of the better individual performances of the season in terms of Connor Barron, as fate would have it, Danny can't ride that hot hand as Connor Barron's suspended for that game of football. So the question then comes is, what does he do with the midfield? What does he do with the defence? Because again, there is almost a blueprint to play against Celtic. So the same should suggest that we should go in and try and put somebody on Callum McGregor, cut the head off the snake and play it that way, as we've shown over the last couple of Old Firms. It can be very, very effective. But if we do that, that's leaving the midfield completely exposed, or we're going to need to take someone away from the defensive areas that's then helping that, because we play with 2 midfielders right now, 2 centre mids, and that's Raskin and Barron, or Raskin and Dio, or Raskin and Rothwell. That's the 2. You can't exactly put one of them on McGregor, so Danny's going to have to get tinkering again and think up what he wants to prioritise in this game. Is it the back door? Is it the middle of the park? Or is it going forward? Now, barring the one European game he was in charge of as he was in the building 10.5 minutes, and he never really implemented his style as he gave the players a chance to show him what he's got, so far he's found the right shape as the games went on. Whether again he started it, or he's found it at half time, or he's tweaked it during the game, and I imagine it's going to be something similar the man will need today. But again, that midfield for me is going to be absolutely vital, because it would be extremely ballsy to play just 2 in there in an Old Firm semi-final. So it is interesting. I would love to know what you think down in the comment section below. Should we start off with this 3-4-3 or the 5-3-2, whatever people want to go ahead and call it, or do we revert back to what's gave us some success in these Old Firms recently and that's playing maybe a 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 and having one extra body in the middle of the park to take McGregor out the game and put all the emphasis on other people to orchestrate and run a game of football, or they find some middle ground and maybe tweak it again and maybe even go like a 3-5-2, ladies and gentlemen. You know what I mean? That could be a possibility in this game of football. Instead of having them out wide, you just bring them and make the game a wee bit more narrow, and then you play Danilo, and then you play Chimete, then you play Asgard just behind them to give a bit of extra legs. This is where it gets nerdy, this is when it gets exciting. But again, only one man knows the answer, and that's the guy in the dugout. All I can hope, ladies and gentlemen, is he picks the right one. And win, lose or draw, the more of the fact that I can sit prior to game of football now with a wee bit of a flicker and a wee bit of a thought and a wee bit of excitement / enthusiasm is good enough for me right now, considering where I was again just 10 days ago to what he's gave already. Again, there has been improvements, but we're no fix. We're no suddenly a world-beating squad. If we manage to get a result, if we're able to do that, absolutely fantastic. Because again, Celtic aren't exactly firing in all cylinders, and we've got a real chance. But again, he's no a magician and magically fixed everything. So I think if we are going to get the job done, we're going to have to do it the hard way. But they've done it on Wednesday. Can this Rangers team just build on it and do it again for us? I hope, and I'll cross everything that I can that they go ahead and pull this one out. And that leads us to our last two talking points in today's video, the lineup and the prediction on. If you're an old time subscriber, you'll remember that wee one-liner. But I imagine it's going to be Butland because he's been fantastic and we're probably going to need him big time in the game versus Celtics. Had some big moments, some bad ones, some big ones, some bad ones. Let's hope it's some big ones. But I believe Tavernier will come back in, which may annoy a lot of people, but I think that's the way it was rotated and done that way, although Max Aarons never gave himself any, or didn't harm himself with his performance at Easter Road. Maybe just defensively sounder might work out. I'm expecting Giga, Suter and Cornelius, if he's able to go, will be in there. Jaden, I imagine, is going to be a massive part of this game of football, running at that right back, trying to create, trying to put pressure on, maybe picking up a yellow card again for the opposition, putting that pressure on with that attacking running. This could be the game Jaden really solidifies himself as a Rangers player. The midfield is then when it gets nippy, because to me, Connor Barron deserves to play. And I'm hoping I'm wrong regarding the yellow cards. I think I might be right, but hopefully I'm wrong, as I usually am, ladies and gentlemen. But I'm pretty damn sure, because he picked up a yellow card versus Alloa, and I'm 97.4% sure he got booked versus Hibs, that he's out in this game, which is a shame because the kid really deserves it. But that's an opportunity for Diamandi, who was very good versus Kelly and had some of his better performances versus Celtic, to bring that same energy in. As much as we were impressed with wee Barron, Diamandi's better on the ball as well, so that might help us get Fuller up the park. So I imagine they will keep it like that, Raskin and Dio, and I think Mike Moore's going to continue his place in the squad. Chimete, I imagine, will keep his place in the squad, and then Danilo, who just can't stop scoring goals right now, should well and truly keep his squad in, and hopefully his dad's at the sideline as well, enjoying himself, dancing, because we might need 15 minutes out of him, depending if it goes to extra time. And where that's why I think Danny will do, the only slight little tweak or slight little change I would necessarily do in the game is maybe move away from that 3-4-3, just make it a wee bit narrower with Danilo and Chimete, and just have Asgard taking out Callum McGregor again, because we've seen it have so much success. I know there's this narrative that his legs have gone and he's finished, and to be fair, a lot of Celtic fans are tweeting out that it does look done and dusted. They obviously watch more Celtic games than me, ladies and gentlemen, but again, to me, I see him as still Celtic's best player, and I think Asgard done a decent job on him there. And I just think if we have him a bit more closer to the midfielders, we might be able to create a wee bit more. Then you've got the opportunity to bring on the gas man, then Mikey Moore, then these players. But again, I imagine it will be the latter. But it's interesting to speculate, and it's exciting to speculate. That's what we're here. You know what I mean? We're football fans. We want to talk about the football. There's no right or wrong reasonings or right or wrong selections. I would love to know who you want to go with. What shape would you go with? Who do you think is going to be the key man? And last but not least, what do you think the old prediction is gonna be? And we're talking about Rangers versus Celtic here. So what do you think I'm going to predict down in the comment section below? You know, that's right. It's a cheeky channel favourite. favourite. And again, where this should suggest that Danilo will get back onto the score sheet, I'm starting to realise it always seems to be the players that's out on the call that comes back just has a really good game randomly out of nowhere. So if that's going to continue, it suggests that Bojan, who's been really poor so far in his Rangers career, is going to somehow come off the bench and score the winner in the game of football. And I hope for that laddie that's the way it's going to go. But that's my thoughts and opinions in the game. Nervous for the game, absolutely. Is it coming a wee bit too soon? Would it have been better to get a couple more weeks for Danny to really get his fingertips into there? Probably, ladies and gentlemen. But again, Celtic's going through their own rigmarole right now, and they've gone through their own thing. So maybe it's fate that both teams during this mad season of Scottish football, with so much questions about how good both teams are these days, and the lack of impact in Europe, when they come face to face with everything that's gone round, and pretty much both fan bases unhappy about what's happening off the park. I imagine it'll give us something to talk about no matter what happens in the game of football. But until tomorrow late, or Sunday late after the game, ladies and gentlemen, I've been sieging over 9-2. It will be late, I do apologise. By the time I get back and do the video on that, it will be very, very late. Hopefully I'm with a smile on my face. But even if that smile is upside down, you know I never hide, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be right here to talk about it and digest it. But come on, Danny, do it one more time for us. And players, just keep buying in. It must be nice. No, we get booed off the park all the time, lads, eh? Surely he's a talk about that in the dressing room. That's quite nice, this. Getting cheered. Yeah, I like that. The bus can leave on time. I like that. Well, win the motor. Win. You know what I mean? That would be nice. But that's me done and dusted, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out everyone that's signed up to the Channel Legend memberships, and those that are signed up to the supporter range. Thank you so much. And to each and every single person watching today's video, hopefully I've done enough to earn that like and subscription. If I haven't, I'll try and get it next time. But until then, thank you all so much for watching. All the best, and bye-bye.